Hello, welcome to today's Back to the City. I'm very excited to be joined by one half of the Silent Treatment, Rob and Claire. Today we're going to take a journey through Suplex and 10. Suplex is, of course, I had to look this up, I didn't know, but a wrestling move.
Correct.
One of the songs, it doesn't give a shout out to, or it's not dedicated to Hulk Hogan because it very clearly asserts that Hulk Hogan is a dick.
He's a dick, yeah, yep.
How did the Hulk Hogan is a dick song come to be?
Well, I just really don't like Hulk Hogan. He's just a really horrible person. I'm a huge Roddy Piper fan, and I'm a huge pro wrestling fan too, especially like the old school like AWA, Vern Gagne kind of school of pro wrestling, but also like the really old school like back when it was the WWF.
Yes.
And so
I remember that.
He is frequently credited with a lot of like selling the business and making pro wrestling what it is, and I've always had an issue with that because he's just such a reprehensible human being.
The song,
and he's not a really good wrestler either. Like he's actually really terrible, and like kind of created that whole persona and fame and things like that based on just like all the wrong things. And so it's probably not surprising that somebody who's into punk rock is more into like the heels and like the bad guys in wrestling. And so I've always kind of veered more towards like the Roddy Piper school of wrestling and talking on the microphone and things like that. He's just a bad person.
The song says he's just a
really bad human being. Yeah, that's exactly the lyric. Yeah. It didn't take a lot of creativity. It's basically like
I've got the message. Thank you very much. In maybe 2-minute long song.
Yeah.
For educating me.
It's just packed with all kinds of
reprehensible.
I don't know if you caught that, but Hulk Hogan's a dick.
A lot of the songs are addressing different yous, whether the you is a specific person. So, for example, in Scandalizer, like, you are a scandalizer, fucking liar. You can swear, by the way.
Oh, good, okay.
That's good to know.
Making drama is what you do.
Yeah.
And then there's other songs which are addressed to a collective of peoples. So take Your Places, for example. That's obviously plural you. You know, there's a lot of songs that are addressed to you, but different types of you, and we'll come back to, of course, many of those. Hulk Hogan is a Dick is the only song which is addressed to one specific named person, and then Cornerstone, the opening track, and possibly my favorite too, is about someone. It's the only song which has like the pronoun he, so rather than addressing someone, it's kind of telling a story about, or there's a narrative. He loves his gun, he loves his truck. And then Bored Teenagers, which I think is a cover of the Adverts.
Yes.
Yep. From 78,
Yep.
English band. Although it's about, again, a set, a collective you, it's we. Like in the lyric is like, we are bored teenagers. So I wondered whether you guys had noticed that there is, that the majority of the songs are addressed to you, and there's shifting yous. And then we have the two exceptions to that rule, really, are Bored Teenagers, where on the one hand, it's characterizing the bored teenagers with some distance, but then there's some empathy, we're connecting. And then also, I also love the Hulk Hogan song. Did he say that he was in Metallica?
He did. He said that
what
he was
a weird
originally.
thing to say.
He said that he was originally scouted to play bass.
There's pictures of him online, like posing with the bass.
That's
It's bizarre.
him trying to provide some evidence.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And if you ask anyone at Metallica, they're like, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, that's insane. And which is kind of the beauty of like Hulk Hogan being such a pathological liar, is that everything, you can discredit everything he says.
I like that this song also, so it says he's terrible at his job and takes credit for things other people do.
Correct.
So you don't have to know anything about Hulk Hogan or wrestling, or you don't have to know what a suplex is to be able to think, oh, I dislike people who take credit for what other people do.
Yeah.
Take credit for other people's work.
Yes.
It also refers to him union busting.
He is. Oh, I'm loving that I get to talk about this. Okay, this is like. I'm not like
We heard about it at rehearsals.
I've peaked as a person right now. So,
Please tell me about Hulk Hogan
Sure.
union busting.
So once upon a time back in the 80s, when Jesse Ventura, our former governor, was still an active pro wrestler in the WWF, he recognized that wrestlers in general uniquely take a lot of figurative and literal hits, right? Like they, and they don't have a lot of great health insurance, and they don't have, they're very frequently, taken advantage of in terms of their talent, their time, what their bodies can endure, and things like that. And they're a lot of times exploited. And so Jesse Ventura made an attempt to unionize pro wrestling. So that they could collectively negotiate contracts, and everybody
Excellent,
was
yes.
And so and Hulk Hogan went and ratted to Vince McMahon, who fired Jesse Ventura and completely union busted the whole idea.
Wow.
And the reason he did that, as the lore goes, I was pretty young when that happened, so I don't know firsthand. However, but as the lore goes, it was Hulk Hogan trying to get a big push and try to suck up to the powers that be and kind of make a better name for himself at the expense of every other guy and every other woman in the locker room.
Right, snitches to the boss about organizing plans. Again in the song.
Yes, because he's a bad person, Simon.
I've got the message, and I like that there's the soundbite. It's like Hulkmania, and it is interesting. It's an interesting kind of test case here because let's start bringing that song into conversation with Cornerstone. Say in Cornerstone, I think the chorus in particular really encapsulates something significant about the ethos of the band and the philosophy of the band. So think for me, tell me what to do. Here we're kind of ventriloquizing for someone who is a sucker. Sucker is a word that shows up multiple times at the end of You Know. I like that song ends sucker, and then the guitar kind of almost performs the same thing. Like the delivery, the intonation, sucker, and then the guitar goes sucker too, essentially.
Yep.
So it's like the music is behind this message. We can see a sucker, pull a sucker out. I suppose the sucker is not as bad a thing to be as a lying, scandalizing
We've got a lot of
character.
opinions.
Sucker is just has fallen for it.
Yeah.
But that's a recurring thing throughout the record. Various people falling for things in separate ways. Even in Bored Teenagers, which again is a cover, the teenagers, what they think they're doing is looking for love. But then the lyric goes, or should I say, emotional rages. So even the teenagers that we are sympathetic to and we relate to so much that we claim to be them, and we're the Bored Teenagers, they're kind of suckers in a way. It's very difficult not to be a sucker as well.
Yes.
So, think for me, tell me what to do. We're ventriloquizing. And the greedy suits love me because I worship them. I'm a sucker. They're suckers. So many people are suckers in different ways.
Yeah.
Group identity means more than humanity. This is the bit that I think really gets to the message of the silent treatment. I finally get a green light to be my ugly self. So in this context where one thing that's happening is people are suckers in different ways, also something else that's happening is people who are lacking a certain degree of self-awareness feel that they're getting green lights to behave in probably reprehensible ways. And that seems to be something it's important to recognize and call out, even more so than calling a sucker, recognizing, because it's the same kind of thing that's happening in Exurban Way. There are these various characters that are getting the green light to be their ugly selves and flourishing. Here I am. So what do the two of you think about that? That seems to be a recurring thing. It's right in the chorus of the opening track. Do you feel that the record is peopled by these characters that feel that they're getting the green light to be their ugly selves?
Yes. Especially I think given the political climate that we're
Yeah.
in, and given
Yeah.
the last 6-8 years, more people have, and I think this also comes down to like technology and being emboldened by, being able to sit and be an awful person and not have immediate consequences because you're
Yeah.
sitting in your basement on your laptop. And so you can override all of those good lessons that we learned in preschool and kindergarten of being kind and having empathy and things like that.
Yeah.
Because there's a figurehead on TV telling you that you can be a total piece of garbage and still get elected as a leader of a free nation. And I think that empowers a lot of people to really sink into poor behavior and like not having a lot of self-awareness or self-reflection, and really making it worse for everyone else. And it's kind of, I guess for me, the biggest kind of critique, and it's it's observational, but the biggest critique for me is just the lack of empathy and treating people like human beings and understanding that everybody's got a different background, different story, different things impacting them. And so when we kind of get into that mindset of I had a really shitty lot in life and I'm fine and you will be too, and and all of that, kind of like all of that mindset that's been politicized so much. That's kind of, I think we see that less possibly in kind of the Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and once you get out into the suburbs and the exurbs, where people have kind of less exposure to different walks of life and different ideas and things like that, it winds up being a thing. And I live about 45 minutes to the north, so like it's something that I observe every day, in my community.
Yeah, the hate in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Which is in the song I think. So they're a bunch of suckers, essentially, believe that the city is just now such a scary place, and there's the narrative about crime and murder and all those robberies. No respect for the thin blue line. Is it any worse, you then ask, though, than the hate in the suburbs? And I think that's another moment that really encapsulates the ethos, the philosophy. That's an important question. One feature of the band that I think is a nice remedy or antidote to this kind of context is the lovely Goo Goo Mucks Reformed Schoolboys Choir.
Yes.
I love that it is called that, and it consists of John Ensley and Rob
Tosova.
Yeah, Rob Tosova, yeah. I had the pleasure and honor of just working the door for Rob's benefit concert at the VFW
okay.
Right,
recently.
yes, you were there, yes.
Yeah, and so Rob and John, how did that come about? It's at the heart of the record, literally on tracks 5 and 6, the two songs right at the center of the record. But I think that the heart of the silent treatment, it has a heart. And it's there and beating it in features like that. Could you expand a bit more about how this choir came to exist and its presence on those couple of songs at the center of the record?
Well, that was actually Rob's. I got to credit Rob with that idea. So I'll let tell us more, Rob.
I just want to involve some other people that are in the scene. I mean, like you were talking about the album and the vibes of it, and so I get with some of the on Cornerstone, think for me, tell me what to do. It's like an Orwellian sort of dystopian kind of vibe. And so the Goo Goo Mucks are another project I do with Joe Holland and Keely and Claire and a bunch of different guest singers. Those Rob and John are guest singers typically in that. So the Reform School is the sort of the re-education camp of the totalitarianism. That's
Absolutely,
that's what I was kind of thinking with that. And so they play in punk rock bands. They message about tolerance and sort of punk rock, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, which we totally respect. But like that thing you said about the green light to be my ugly self.
Yeah.
It's once you turn off the empathy, like Clara was saying, all you're left with is just sort of venom.
Yeah.
And, you know,
and entitled venom often.
yes. And then so once you do that, it's easy to scapegoat the other. And so some of the songs kind of tie in. So kind of a long answer, but that's
No, it's good.
Inslee
It's good.
bringing
It's a
it into
conversation.
that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, and I thought that, you know, since they're regular Google Mics, different people were asked. They were the two that showed up for the pizza. So no. It's a little more complicated than that. But yes, but yes, we had pizza. Yes.
Nice. I like that it ends with another cover, Tied Down. Yeah. Tied Down is Negative Approach.
Yes.
So we're in the 80s now, 1983 as opposed to the
Right.
70s before. There, you made your choice, now there's no turning back. When you had second thoughts, why didn't you fucking run? It's interesting, because it's just come shortly after the song, well, Keep Running is, you know, on the second half of the record. And Keep Running, again, it's like the totalitarian, dystopian context, very much like in You Know, where the hateful person perhaps in the suburbs looking in at the city is like, why don't these people just get a job if they're, you know, if they're committing robberies or whatever? Why don't they get a job? Why don't they take on more hours?
Right.
To be able to reliably have enough hours. I have 4 jobs.
Yeah.
Because especially in the, you know, if like in the service industry,
Yep.
post-COVID as well.
Yeah.
Often my hours are wildly shifting. So if I
Right.
want to have all the hours, like
Right.
one needs to have multiple jobs. And then when things are going well for whichever job, then you're expected to work the hours. And like,
Yeah.
how do you then suddenly work all of these jobs to keep the jobs?
And that's like the insanity of it. One job should be enough.
Yeah.
Nobody should have to have more than one job.
Right.
Like, we should live in an economy where we can support ourselves with one job and not feel like we're worked to death and like we're like, you know, one medical emergency away from bankruptcy.
Absolutely.
Like, that's kind of, you
Yeah.
know, like that, it's just, and I think sometimes people, it's like, you know, you mentioned the entitlement. Like, you know, sometimes that works out for folks and they live on credit cards and they live on debt and things like that and they don't think about that. And so that becomes in turn like, how do we re-examine even like our economic system and like how great capitalism is really being to us?
Yep, it makes me think also in Exurban Way. No, it's first world problems.
Yes.
So this barista who's maybe, you know, not like having their hours cut short, so because there's not enough people coming into the cafe, say. Meanwhile, from the perspective of the customer, that they're just screwing up the cappuccino.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
Like, and boo-hoo, and is that the worst thing that happened to you today?
Right.
It's probably not a bad life.
But it strikes me as interesting. Like in the chorus of that, it's our first world problems.
Yeah.
So it's kind of avoiding just like finger wagging at this other there. Similar thing to in Bored Teenagers, where, you know, some of the lyrics. Again, obviously I know that that's a cover, but on the one hand, I like that the silent treatment is stripped down and subtle as a car accident. So not very subtle. It's obviously implying. But then there are these nuances, and it would be too simple, I think, if the you that's being addressed is always this terrible, reprehensible thing that I have no empathy with and is nothing like me, then perhaps there's some projection and like, but we're kind of reckoning with the shadow, you know, so to speak, a bit insofar as we're including ourselves, like the.
Right.
So, do you have any thoughts on that component?
Well, I think we in the U.S. we have a tendency. A lot of us have a tendency to take things for granted. You know, I lived in a developing country for 6 years, and it was a very grounding experience. You know.
Where did you live?
And so I lived in Jordan. Yeah, and so. You know, where you don't know that water's necessarily going to come out of the faucet when you turn it on, and you know, there are no social services, and everything around you is abject poverty. And then you come back and you're like, stupid phone. Oh, and then it's just, and so like I include myself because I spend a good amount of time also like checking myself and checking my like, really, how big of a problem is this today, right? Like if the worst thing that happens today is that my cappuccino gets screwed up, I'm gonna live. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
But
it's part of the reform. The reform choir,
Yes.
like the reprogramming oneself.
Yes.
Yeah, like and so so it's. I think that's kind of where that song, and that song was actually we re-recorded that for this album, but that song actually was on our very first EP. A few years ago, and so we redid it, and and I love how it sounds. But it was originally recorded up in Sparta at Rich Matson's studio.
Okay, so
but it was like the first song we ever wrote.
That makes me think. Let's shout out Jacques Wade. You recorded the record at the Terrarium and also Flower Studio.
Yes.
Some of the tracks. Is it correct that you went in planning to do an EP, but came out with an LP?
Yes.
Yep. So could you talk a little bit about the process of working with Jacques and how you became aware whilst working with him that you were sitting on an album, in fact, rather than an EP?
Yeah, I've worked with Jacques before. He's great. And Dave, our bass player, plays with him in the boot and stuff. So we all know him.
I know him. He's great.
Yeah. Great guitarist. Great ear, great musician. So he served as producer and engineer on this. And then
he mastered it too.
Yes, he did. Yep. And then KJ did some too, because Terrarium was booked a couple of days when we needed to get in there for some things. But and I like working with Chris too. He's great. But it was Jacques that was we had gone in and we recorded or we had laid down the basic tracks for it was Keep Running. And Jacques said to me, I don't remember who else was in the room, but he said as soon as you played that song and that riff, I knew that you guys were making a record. So that's we had shifted course right before that, but that in my mind cemented that we're on a record path rather than a EP path.
And Jacques was the first to discern that.
Yep. Yeah. That's I don't know. I think we laid down the track. I think it took a couple of times, and we laid it down. And Jacques like, "That's when I knew we were making a record." So,
nice.
Yeah.
Keep Running is interesting because that is commenting. Keep them dumb. Keep them moving just to survive. So there's a sense that there's a component of it's systematic is a recurring phrase too.
Yep.
So not only is it difficult for someone to get by with the multiple jobs and it's not just a case of why don't they ask for more hours. Not only is that the case, but there is a component of that being intentionally the case to make it very likely that a person will be sucked in. That happens in Take Your Places in an interesting, slightly different way. There is nuance. I think that there's more nuance than you said the subtlety of a car crash, but there's nuance. Maybe there's not subtlety, but there's definitely nuance. Life of the Party on all the lists, but the partnership is a little complicated. You'll get sucked in until you can't come up. So there's this social dynamic where even on this more interpersonal level, perhaps, somebody gets sucked in. It seems analogous to the Suits loving me because I worship them. Not speaking personally there. But there it's like there's a character who is able to acquire some kudos in the scene through connection, association with others, but that person also is getting sucked in and losing themselves. And it's when we get sucked in and lose ourselves that paradoxically, perhaps we're most likely to feel that we're getting the green light to be our ugly self. One hopes that one has to be sucked in and some mind control be happening for this ugliness to be then owned as like who I am. I have more faith in people.
Wow, you make us sound so cynical, Simon. Jeez.
Well, no. I mean, it's not. I think it's you're seeing what's happening, so it's not being cynical. And at the same time, if there is faith in the reform choir and the kind of reprogramming that can happen, one likes to think that there could be some hope of the person who is presently just like letting ugliness just flow out of them, and that person might have a core that is not quite as ugly.
Sure. Well, and I think it's like anything else that trips us up socially, whether it's like sexism or racism. We have to name it first, and then when we name it, we can talk about dismantling it and restructuring something better.
Yes.
And so I guess I left off at the like restructuring part in a lot of the lyrics. It's just like this sucks, and
Yeah.
But I think we talk about it, and I think in a lot of ways music is it's a shared experience, right? Lyrically and just the experience of live music as well. And so when people hear things that hopefully resonate with them in terms of like lyrics and sound, that hopefully has some like kind of pushing the needle a little bit on some social change.
Yeah.
Well, and it falls into it's a lot of the critique is you can't change anything unless like Claire just said, what the real problem is. And so what does it profit somebody to gain the world but lose their soul in the process? And so the critiques on capitalism, the critiques on sort of social networks, and standing on someone else's shoulders, basically, all of it is about sort of being a lot of it is about being top dog and trying to dominate others through a lot of it's just shitty behavior.
Yeah.
And so I think punk rock is a medium that's eminently suited for talking about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Whether I'll name bands, but the Dead Boys or whoever, or the Clash or the Pistols or whoever, and it there's always a little bit of a nihilistic approach in the sense that it's not necessarily offering solutions necessarily, but it's saying this is the problem, and everybody's blind to what the problem is, or they're ignoring it, or they're pushing it under the rug. As long as, again, about profiting, to gain the world, but you lose your soul, because you're trying to, you're worried about being a cog in the system and getting ahead, rather than dealing with what the problem is. We all get sucked into it, in one way or another. And it's like, oh, if I only work harder, then that's the real problem. And that's sort of, it's propaganda that we've been told. I mean, I first heard that when I was a little kid with Reagan, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I'm a self-made man, etc. Very few people are self-made. That's the myth of the United States. It's a myth of the world.
Right.
Money begets money. It's easy to be successful when you're successful already, and so it's a lot of criticisms on that. And so the sucker and the people that have been bought into that sort of narrative, which really is portrayed by the ruling elites and the wealthy, it is designed to oppress straight up. And so and people fall into that trap, and once you fall into it, you have a hard way, or it's hard to think your way out of it. And so I think this album is a criticism of like, okay, this is the trap. We don't have answers to it, but at least be aware that you're a rat running in a maze for a piece of cheese.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, being able to recognize and highlight this is a trap. Seems like a pretty important thing to communicate in such a context.
It is. I mean,
to jolt.
Sort of forewarned is forearmed.
Yeah.
As
Absolutely.
far as that stuff goes.
Yeah.
We can think about solutions. Maybe someday in a happier, kinder, gentler, silent treatment, we'll offer solutions.
That'll be the acoustic album.
Yes. We'll be playing with the Minnesota Orchestra. Yeah.
It said, if at all, how does the name, the silent treatment, relate to the kind of the ethos, the philosophy that we've been talking about? So, and also Suplex in 10, we jumped straight from that to the song that references Hulk Hogan. But how does the imagery of Suplex in 10 relate to this particular set of punk songs?
Well, there's 10 tracks, and we like to think that they're all pretty hard hitting.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the simple version.
That's it.
Yeah.
That is.
Well, pro wrestling and rock and roll too have a lot to do with each other, right? Because the athleticism and the performance.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if there's a sport that's closest related to rock and roll, it would be wrestling. In a lot of ways, pro wrestling.
Interesting. That, so we have. I was thinking about Hulk Hogan and him like saying Hulkmania, as you were talking about the self-made man. So there's this whole narrative and fiction and fantasy of us, and there's going to be that with wrestling, the characters. But there, with the hypocrisy and the lying and the taking credit and so on, and it seemed more and more fitting that we have this self-aggrandizing Hulk Hogan character existing in this record, given the diagnosis and prognosis that we've been of the broader culture that we've been discussing. Back to wrestling and rock music. So Hulk Hogan therefore seems to come across as like the band that's all about the front man, and the front man who can get away with anything because he is the front man. And I just wondered what thoughts you had about that, extending this analogy of wrestling and rock music. The Silent Treatment isn't a band that has a front person that is Hulk Hogan-like.
Oh my God! Oh shit! Yes, I ever do.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very different type of thing.
Claire's been known to posture though.
But hey,
Get some headlocks thrown in there.
Because there are bands like that, aren't there?
Yeah.
And Silent Treatment isn't a band like that.
No.
What thoughts do you have about that fact?
Well, I don't know, and I kind of come across music with a little bit more self-deprecating humor too. The guys in the Silent Treatment are like amazing musicians. I mean, Rob and Dave and Keeley are like they really bring it. Like, I mean, anybody can like stand out there and complain about life and yell into a microphone. But like these guys are really what bring it, and so I feel lucky every day that like I get to do this project with them. And so I think there's a level, and then just in terms of like how we create music, and even the songs that we decide to cover. There's a very collaborative approach, somebody works on lyrics and then we bring music to it and then we tweak it and then we do this and hey, how do you think this sounds? And I've never gotten the sense that we really have any ego in our band, like in terms of like trying to like make it a pissing match. Like everybody really like we have this kind of underlying like sense of respect and collaboration with each other. And those guys are awesome.
Likewise. Yes.
There's no risk of
awesome,
player mania.
Yeah. Well, I've been in grooves where sort of an ego or two dominates everything, and it's a bummer. Because everybody brings their piece to the puzzle, and some people, that's the whole thing about a group, right? You work together because, everybody. The pieces fit together. Somebody adds something that somebody else doesn't necessarily have, whether it's in the songwriting sense or music arranging sense, or graphics, and visual sense, or stage performance sense, whatever. So, and that's the thing. It's sort of like the concept we were talking earlier about the album. Sort of the answer is really, if you want to say the optimistic thing on the album, it's to lift everyone up. We either rise together, or we fall together. And so the idea is. If Claire has a set of lyrics and she brings them to me, or and I set music to it, or Keeley sets music, and then we all bring it together and then add, arrangement ideas, or hey, let's open this with a bass lick or something like that. It's about making everything better.
Yeah, joining forces and being better together.
Exactly.
And I imagine the album artwork, aesthetic apparatus. Maybe we could tie that in.
Sure.
In this, because that seems to fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, that runs Aesthetic Apparatus. He does tour posters and album arts, and he used to do stuff for the Triple Rock back in the day and stuff. I've always been a fan of his work. We decided to make an album, and we had Patty Rhodes come down and do some photography. Mike, did his magic with it. We collaborated on some suggestions, and he put it all together and kind of, made the magic happen. We're purposely wanting something that is sort of lo-fi punk rock, with halftone kind of stuff and everything, and he did a bang-up job. I gave him some color schemes, we gave some photos, thumbs up, thumbs down, and he went to town on it.
Yeah,
and I just kind of wanted to let him do what he does best.
Yeah.
Though for his taste, I probably stuck my finger in it a little bit too much, but that's all right. No, he was very complimentary about the whole thing, and I think his artwork's great. So, and that's the whole thing about this too. It's like working with Jacques, working with Mike, working with Rob and John and stuff. It's making an album or doing any kind of artistic endeavor is not just about the 4 people involved or however big your band is. There's a whole set of people, the people that help, book gigs, for the different places, like Joe Holland and Christy Costello and stuff, working with James Taylor at First Avenue for our release show and all that. So all these people, Chris Riemenschneider, gave us a nice little piece in the Strib and a write-up. So it not to be cliche, but it does take a village, you know. So if you're the tip of the mountain, there's all these people underneath that have supported what your project is and everything. And so we're keenly aware of that and very appreciative of everybody involved and that's helped out.
Absolutely. Yeah, as Claire, when you were celebrating the other 3 band members, it reminded me of something that I noticed when I was looking at the one sheet, where all of the other band members, it lists the various bands, projects they've been in or are still in, everything from Old Yeller, Trailer Trash, Rich Matson and the North Stars, Kind of Kinky, Cindy Lawson, Low Rats, Loose Rails, and then Claire.
And then there's me.
Is this your first band?
Yep.
So how did you end up fronting this band?
I don't know.
Congratulations. No. Well, because you do a great job.
Well, thank you.
And and you were Claire of the Silent Treatment.
Yeah.
You only need one. But how therefore did it come to be?
Well, I got into punk rock like pretty late in life, just because I am in the first place a terrible music consumer, and then didn't really have access.
It's good to be a terrible consumer.
It's good in some ways. It helps me out a lot going to the grocery store for sure. But I got into it relatively late in life, and then when Keely and I met and started dating and eventually got married, he was like, that was just when Old Yeller was starting to wrap up, and I was starting to get more into I was going to more local shows and kind of oh, there's this, holy shit, there's this thing called punk rock that is and Dillinger 4 and Off With Their Heads and all of these great bands, and then Keely and I met, and he was like, you're really scarily into this. I wonder if you could do that in a microphone in front of a crowd, and that's kind of where the Silent Treatment was born.
Yeah, I love it. And so I mean, it seems like you really got the ethos and related to the ethos. It's exciting, it sounds good, and it's something important on a human level is happening with the kind of the intervention that punk music makes within the culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's-
I'm a lyrics nerd, so
Yeah.
so the lyrics to me are like huge, and and so hearing some of those lyrics and reading, and then it was just the whole package. It was like Jesus, like where has this been, and why am I just finding it now? Oh, that's right, because I'm a terrible music consumer, and I didn't live in the U.S. for a while. So, so it's so the whole thing to me, it's like it's the ethos and it's the lyrics and it's like the fast move go, and I also have a very terrible like attention span, so I'm like anything more than 2.5 minutes I'm like no, like what,
Right.
oh, it's 3 minutes. Oh, like, I have to listen to the whole thing. Yeah.
So you were very well prepared for that. And you were who reached out to me for the interview, and on the one sheet, you're the contact
Yes.
as well. So how nice that you've wound up kind of as though on the one hand it's very collaborative and it's more so than just the four of you. On the other hand, you're kind of you're at the helm. And what a cool place you clearly fit there, and how cool to have found yourself or to have chosen to move into that position.
Well, thank you. I mean, I've run for public office several times, and there's a lot of similarities between running a campaign and like promoting a band and getting the organizational piece done.
Yeah.
And same thing with my day job. I'm a teacher by day, so like there's a huge like for me, I kind of nerd out over like the organizational piece and here's what my Google Drive looks like, and here's this doc, and here's that doc.
It's like making a lesson plan.
It is, and so it's very it is.
I've been a teacher too.
And so for me, it kind of just it's a very like natural like yep, and then we're going to organize this, and then we're going to organize that, and the rest of the guys help out too. You know, so it's where I'm like, you know what, I need to tag somebody in, and so somebody's like, I'll tag Robin or Dave or Keely, and they'll take the ball and run as well occasionally. But I just really like doing it. Like I like the organizational piece of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, me too. Do keep running in this good way, as opposed to the keep running way in which the people are doing so in this song. Thank you very much for coming in today. I'm excited about the band, and please come back when next time you go in to make an EP and end up with like a double album.
Yes.
Nobody needs a double album.
Yeah.
A double album of 2-minute long songs.
Wow.
Right.
Yep. Well, thanks so much for
thanks
having
for
us,
having
and
us.
thanks for everything that you do
Yeah.
in our community to raise it up and support it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
You're very welcome. This has been Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder. We'll be back on MCN6 next Thursday at 10 o'clock.